When I look back at myself then, and when I look back at myself when I first started working with clients and looking at like the beliefs that I clung on to so vehemently about the right things to do in relationship and the wrong things to do, or like the right ways to practice non-monogamy and the wrong ways to practice non-monogamy. And I would say that's probably been the biggest change for me, is just like loosening my grip a lot, because I think I learned very quickly working with clients that if someone comes into a session with me and maybe they're practicing a type of non-monogamy that I don't have experience with, or that maybe I'm like, oh, I would never do that myself personally. Like I have to switch on the empathy muscle, and I have to try to understand where they're coming from and why they might choose to practice this way. And I have to find a way to validate that. And so I think where that's led me to is maybe a little bit of this like exhausted neutrality is perhaps what I would call it, around just be in relationship however you want to be in relationship. Like, I don't care if it's polyamorous, swinging, monogamy. I don't care if it's a hall pass. I don't care if it's don't ask, don't tell. Just like be kind, be compassionate, be honest, and make sure that like everyone you're connected to is consenting to this type of relationship. If that's the case, just go nuts. I think that that's where I've ended up, is just like find some kind of basis of your own integrity for partnership and do that and seek out other people who also want to do that with you.
Welcome to Normalizing Non-Monogamy, the podcast where we interview incredible people from all over the world to hear their personal journeys of self-discovery through the lenses of love, sex, and relationships.
Our mission is to show people that they're not alone and to inspire them to embrace their true selves so that together we can open minds and live authentically without shame.
We believe everyone's story is powerful and beautiful, yet it's important to remember that everyone does life a little bit differently, and that the views and opinions expressed by our guests do not necessarily reflect our own.
Additionally, we aren't doctors. Please consult a medical professional for anything regarding your health that you might learn about on the show. Enjoy!
Welcome to episode 327. We're Finn and Emma, and today we have a beautiful conversation with Dedeker. Dedeker is the co-host of the Multiamory podcast and an amazing relationship coach and educator. She was previously on the podcast back in episode 104 in January 2020. Today, we bring her back to have a wonderful conversation about her life the last few years and all of the things that she's gone through and learned. It's an incredible conversation.
Yeah, it's been, many, many moons.
Yes.
It's been a while since we've had her on, and it's so exciting to get some updates and hear how the landscape of relationships have changed for her, but also just, I think so much is different. This is something that you and I have realized too over the last few years, is sort of our approach to relationships, our philosophies on it, the ways we talk about it, they've changed. And I think the same is true for Dedeker. And she talks a bit about that and sort of where she's landed and just how she navigates relationships. And it's a beautiful conversation. I think one of the parts I love about it is I think it's easy to look at people who do relationships for a living. Let's say that, right? She studies them. She researches them. That's the same thing. She talks about them.
She's an educator. She's a coach.
Right.
She's a podcaster.
And yet so many of the experiences are so relatable for us as well. And so just incredibly grateful for Dedeker to come on and share her story. And also, we got an exclusive. We have a story that out of over 450 Multiamory podcasts, and who knows how many other shows, Dedeker dropped a story here that she's never dropped before. So I am so grateful when that happens, when people come on like, hey, I've never told this anywhere. And we get it first.
So stay tuned. You're gonna want to listen.
That is your incentive to stick around till the end. It's worth it.
It definitely is. It definitely is. You can find out more about Dedeker's work over on her website or on Multiamory's website. Links are in the podcast show notes. We also wanted to do a special shout out. Dedeker is co-hosting a poly healing retreat in April in Costa Rica. This is a super exciting event, and she is co-hosting this with Orit, who was previously on episode 309. Links to check that all out are in the show notes as well.
Yeah, Dedeker is going to talk more about this, and Orit talked about it when we had her on back last fall. And yeah, definitely check this out. We are super bummed we couldn't go. We tried like multiple times to go do this. We were like, we're going to go. And then we backed out. And then we're like, no, we're going to go again. And then we backed out. But yeah, please check this out. It looks amazing.
There are spots available.
There are some spots available. So with that, for anybody who is a premium subscriber, we're going to jump right into the conversation now. And for the rest of you, we have a couple of quick announcements. The first one being, how do you skip all of these announcements? You sign up from the premium subscription. It's $4 a month, or I think $40 a year. You can find out more on our homepage at normalizingnonmonogamy.com or in your podcast player show notes. Right there, you'll find all the information. And then you don't have to listen to the next couple of minutes of amazing yammering that we're about to do.
Or you can.
Or you can, because it's pretty good stuff. There's some really good nuggets in here.
There is. So next up, we do have our next virtual meet and greet in February coming up this coming Saturday, the 17th. So you can sign up at our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com.
And then after you do that and you're like, wow, these were amazing people, we'd highly recommend you check out our virtual community full of nearly 300 people from all over the globe who come together every month, or actually every day, multiple times a day, in an app that we use to foster community, build community, and support one another. It's amazing. We actually do virtual Q&As on Zoom every month. We have a men's group. We have a women's group. We get together and play games. We share stories. We share photos. It's a good time.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, and we have in-person retreats that we do too.
Yes, we do.
Those will blow your mind.
We just did one in January.
The real point is you want to join these. So you can head over to our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com. You can click on the community tab and learn more about that. And I don't even think we told you how to find that virtual meet and greet. That's back on our website too. You go to the banner at the top or on the events tab. Just basically go to our website and you will find all of the amazing stuff and all of the amazing ways to meet people. Or if you're really confused, because we got all confused in here, send us an email.
Yes, but you should be able pretty easy to find.
Yeah,
hopefully.
the virtual meet and greet's open to anybody and everybody who is amazing. The community is a private community that costs a couple of bucks a month.
Yes.
I think we cleared it up with that.
Oh, yes, right.
Super clear.
And again, as Finn said, please reach out to us, send us a voicemail, send us an email if you do have any questions.
Or if you wanted to come on the show, that's a great way to do it as well.
Yes, that is.
You don't have to be a Dedeker Winston. You could just be a you.
Yes.
You don't have to be here
to
promote anything. You don't have to have the most amazing toothbrush story that's ever been told.
You're teasing it.
I'm teasing.
Next up, we also wanted to do a reminder to everyone out there to check out our favorite way to get tested for STIs, which is stdcheck.com. Oh, hey, it's Valentine's Day.
It is Valentine's Day.
So that's the perfect time to get tested for STIs.
Well, the perfect time would have been like 3 days before Valentine's Day. But I would say actually maybe Valentine's Day is a great day because you're like, today, I need more people in my life.
Yeah.
And the best way to do that is to get tested. Maybe that's your Valentine's Day outing together.
Maybe.
Then you're ready for the weekend of post-Valentine's Day debauchery.
Well, regardless of whether you celebrate Valentine's Day or not, it is still a wonderful time to get tested for STIs. Go to our website under the resources tab, and you can use the links there for stdcheck.com. Using those links, you get $10 off, making a 10-panel test only $129, and you support the show. So thank you so much for doing that. And the best part, you get to know your sexual health status.
I also think it's amazing that we were just like, well, the only way to celebrate Valentine's Day is to go and get yourself boning as much as possible.
No, STI testing. That's the way to celebrate it.
That's the true way to celebrate Valentine's Day. Yes.
There are many ways. We're off on a tangent.
I think the whole point is we'd love you to use those links because knowing your sexual health status is super important anytime you're out mixing and mingling with people that you're interested in.
Yes.
Last thing. Oh, hey, another sexual health thing.
Yes.
We do Ask Us Anything episodes. I've been doing those with Miche for the last few months. We have another one coming up next Friday, but we're bringing a special guest on in a few months. Mila, who is the director of marketing for One Condoms, is coming on to answer all of your condom questions. So if you have questions about condoms, send them to us. Send us a voicemail. You can find out information on our website. Same place you reach out to us to send us an email. Yeah, send us a voicemail. We'll use it here or we'll use it in the Ask Us Anything episode. We'll answer your question and you'll help out probably millions of people around the world.
Yes.
I'm going to round up
Of course.
to millions of people around the world. And with that,
we're ready to go and talk with Dedeker.
Let's do it. Welcome back to the podcast, Dedeker. We were just talking. It has been 4 years, going on 35 years since we talked. We talked to you January of 2020, so pre-pandemic, and here we are again. Welcome back.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be here. I'm really glad to have gotten onto mostly the other side of that pandemic thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Indeed. It still comes up here and there, but I feel like we're mostly through it.
Yeah. What a wild time, huh? What a wild time for polyamorous folks in particular. I learned from the way my own work with clients went and the way my own relationships went. Like, no one has, it was a real shame, like not having the book that was about how to be polyamorous in a pandemic. I think we all could have appreciated it.
Yeah, it would have been helpful.
For the next one. For the next one, we'll get right in.
Boy, oh boy.
Well, I'm really excited you're back. I know we're both excited you're back. And I think we'd love to hear a little bit about, how has...
Well, first off, I'm back up. For anyone who's just not familiar with you, you do a quick introduction.
Yeah, definitely. So my name is Dedeker Winston. I'm one of the co-hosts and co-producers of the Multiamory podcast, which is a research-backed relationship advice show that is inclusive of all types of modern relationships. I also work one-on-one with clients. I work with individuals. I work with dyads. I work with triads and more. I recently got my certification for doing somatic experiencing therapy. So I also do that with clients, which is a trauma healing modality. That's really been just like super fantastic. And I'm a Virgo and a Virgo rising. So that's everything you need to know about me.
Perfect. Well,
I love the summary.
Yeah, and as I was saying, that excited to have you back because I think, right, you've alluded to the fact that your relationships have changed, and I'm going to speak from personal experience here. Like our views or my views on relationships and relating and non-monogamy over the last 4 years have changed drastically, and so I see that reflected in how we do interviews, how we talk to people, and how we share, and I would imagine it's probably shifted for you as well. And so I'm excited to dig into another relationship junkie about relationships and to talk about all that. So thank you for being back.
For sure. For sure. I may have already spoken about this last time I was here because I think this process was beginning for me, but I feel so grateful to have not just my own non-monogamous experience, but for there to be this growing community of people who are very visible, very out, willing to talk about their experiences, but also now like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours working with clients, hearing everybody else's non-monogamous experiences and like the joys and the sorrows. And then also at Multiamory, spending so many hours diving into relationship research and answering listener questions. That's like been obviously a lot of time and effort, but I feel so grateful to have tapped into this kind of particular body of knowledge because it's really helped me have a lot of opportunities to be examining and re-examining my own relationship practices, questioning and re-questioning my own relationship beliefs. And when I look back at when we started the podcast 10 years ago, it's going to be 10 years this August.
Wow. Congratulations.
Congrats, yeah.
Wild, absolutely wild. 200 years in podcasting terms.
Yes.
When I look back at myself then, and when I look back at myself when I first started working with clients and looking at like the beliefs that I clung on to so vehemently about the right things to do in relationship and the wrong things to do, or like the right ways to practice non-monogamy and the wrong ways to practice non-monogamy. And I would say that's probably been the biggest change for me, is just like loosening my grip a lot. Because I think I learned very quickly working with clients that if someone comes into a session with me and maybe they're practicing a type of non-monogamy that I don't have experience with, or that maybe I'm like, oh, I would never do that myself personally. Like I have to switch on the empathy muscle and I have to try to understand where they're coming from and why they might choose to practice this way. And I have to find a way to validate that. And so I think where that's led me to is maybe a little bit of this like exhausted neutrality is perhaps what I would call it, around just be in relationship however you want to be in relationship. Like, I don't care if it's polyamorous, swinging, monogamy. I don't care if it's a hall pass. I don't care if it's don't ask, don't tell. Just like be kind, be compassionate, be honest, and make sure that like everyone you're connected to is consenting to this type of relationship. If that's the case, just go nuts. I think that that's where I've ended up, is just like find some kind of basis of your own integrity for partnership and do that and seek out other people who also want to do that with you.
I love that description, and it's so relatable. I think I don't know for Emma, but I have come to a very similar place in the last few months of just do whatever makes you happy, be kind to people, communicate that that's what you're going to do.
Yeah, communicate expectations.
Give them the opportunity to opt in or opt out, and then just be like, it's okay. Your way's not wrong. My way's not wrong, but our two ways may not be compatible. And that's okay. Then let's figure that out, and then not try to force you into my way or me into your way. And
right.
But it's really hard to do when you meet somebody and you're like, but this is my person. And you're like, but you want to be a swinger and they want to be living on a commune with 50 people and whatever. Like you're not aligned, or they want to be monogamous and whatever. So there's just being able to talk about what we really want, but also we don't always know what we really want.
Right. Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think I these days also spend a lot of time thinking about some of these bigger picture issues, like, how are we gonna secure rights for relationship diversity and family diversity?
Yeah.
Like what do we actually need in order for that to happen? And realizing that sometimes to actually build any kind of clout or any kind of power, you need to be able to shake hands with people that you don't 100% agree with their methods or with how they're in relationship necessarily. Like, some of solidarity building is a little bit of plugging your nose and being like, okay, I don't think I would do the same things this person is doing, but we have the same interest here in wanting our freedom to kind of choose the type of relationship that we want to have, the type of family that we want to have, to be protected and to be validated and realized, right? And sometimes when I say that, people think that I'm saying oh, you need to be best friends with a bigot or something like that, and I don't think that's the case. I think about, Billy Procida from the Man Whore podcast actually was the one who told me about we think about the people kind of 15% to either side of us as far as who hold different beliefs or different practices, and connect to those people, find ways to connect to those people. You don't need to reach to the person who's, doing something you find so incredibly disgusting and a turnoff, and connect to them. But
Sure.
We can kind of expand our capacity to the sides in that way, as far as, I think, finding ways to accept and kind of join together with other people who also want to be able to have the relationships they want to be able to have.
Yeah, without a doubt. I'm curious, in this journey for you, Dedeker, how has it impacted who you choose to relate with, who you choose to get into relationships with, or even the structure of what those relationships look like?
Well, I'm so glad you asked. It's been just what a loopy-doopy couple of years it's been in general.
Super simple, right?
For everybody. And then for me, I mean, I went through, of course, we all had our own personal hell that happened during the pandemic. And my personal hell was that at the time, so I was with my partner, Jace, who's one of my co-hosts on the podcast. And then I was with my partner, Alex, as well. And he had recently accepted a job in Australia, and Australia closed their borders for a year. For over a year. It literally, he and I were geographically separated for a year. And I didn't know how to do polyamory in that situation. That was brand new to me. I had no idea how to deal with that. And, understandably, that put a lot of strain on the relationship. And while fortunately we were able to reunite after a ton of paperwork and bullshit for me to get into Australia again, unfortunately that relationship ended, when was it? Beginning of of 2022, like right at the beginning of 2022. And then that started another really weird period for me where I was like, oh gosh, like my other partner broke up with me. And then my partner, Jace, he had gone through a breakup right before the pandemic. And so he didn't have any other partners. And we had this weird moment of looking at each other where we're like, I guess we're like default monogamous now. And like overnight, I went from like, oh yeah, I'm the polyamory podcaster who like, spends several months out of the year splitting my time, like living with two partners and like traveling all over the world and being nomadic to like, I live in the suburbs with my monogamous partner. And that's it. And understandably,
what a shift.
Oh my goodness, understandably set off a little bit of an identity crisis. For a little while. It was so weird, it was because this was another new situation where I think in this community, when most people end up going back to a monogamous structure, usually they're intentionally choosing that. Usually it's like, hey, this isn't working. Let's pause. Or, hey, let's be monogamous for a while. Or, hey, that was fun for this particular period of time, but like, let's be monogamous during this period. And it was completely unintentional for both of us. It was entirely situational, right? And so for both myself and Jace, it was a little bit of this like weird, like, oh, okay, I guess we're normies now, sort of situation. But it was fine, I didn't like, neither of us like spun out and freaked out about it. We had, fairly regular check-ins about that and like kind of knowing that like, well, I know we are functionally monogamous right now, but we're not like actually monogamous. Like we still talk about the people we're attracted to and talk about, like setting up our property agreement to make sure that if other partners are in the picture, like they're a part of that, or considered for in that. And so that was sort of a weird, wackadoo kind of time. And then the beginning of last year was when I was finally ready to date again. And I started dating an old friend of mine who I'd known for 15 years. And like many, many years ago, we'd had a little bit of like off and on again, dating, but had mostly been friends for all that time. And we spent a really long time very intentionally whipping out the relationship anarchy smorgasbord and trying to talk about what are we interested in? What could it look like? How do we, how are we going to do this? Yada, yada, yada. And that was also a brand new experience for me, sort of like dipping, kind of like escalating from a previously de-escalated relationship. So it's just been so many lessons, I think is maybe the most neutral way that I can say. So many lessons. Overall, I want to say like positive, I don't regret much of the last 4 years, other than it would have been nice if the pandemic was like a slightly bit less stressful. But yeah, I don't know.
Next time.
It's just like every time I think I've got this non-monogamy thing figured out, like something new comes along, or I have a client who's doing it in a brand new way. And so, yeah, it's just wild.
And you're just like, that's interesting.
Yes.
What do I want to like? There's always this like growth, like that you're encouraging in some ways of like, that's interesting and that's interesting. And do I want to try that? Do I not want to try that? I don't know. And so it's like you find, at least for me, like oftentimes you feel like you just get into a little bit of a groove and then it's immediately something else.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Well, I think too that it is somewhat the nature of non-monogamy, and I don't think non-monogamy is the only catalyst for personal growth, but it's clearly a catalyst, right? We don't get to just sit and be complacent. We're having to constantly learn new tools, hone the tools, figure out how to talk to people. Even if Emma and I figure it out, it may just be months or days before somebody else pops up, even just to have a conversation about it. And so we're always having to be ready to adapt. And I think that isn't something that often happens in a long-term monogamous partnership, but I think it can in other ways, right? If maybe it's a job that causes that, or kids, or something can cause that. But I think it's really interesting. And I also think too, in that with that in mind, we aren't the same person we were the week before, the month before, and surely not years before. And then we get to watch our partners also do that. And so maybe just to validate the amount of shifting and changing that's happening. And so to have an identity crisis of two people who have been doing the non-monogamy dance, to just step back and almost just look around and go, wait a minute, this is almost too calm.
Gosh,
Like what's happening? Like, why is there not anything else popping up?
Yeah, totally. That's so interesting. You bring up the sort of the future self thing. I know I recently listened to a TED talk about that, about with relationships, with marriage, with our life aspirations, that so much of it is like projecting onto a future person, that we're still going to want the same things or do the same things or be the same person. And there is this funny, I forget what they called it, but it's like some sort of cognitive bias where it's a lot easier for us to look to our past selves. So again, to look to myself from 4 years ago, or when I was 21, or when I was 15, and to acknowledge, wow, like there's been so much change. I'm so different now. I want so many different things than I did when I was that age. But for some reason, when we think about ourselves like 4 years, 10 years, 15 years in the future, we don't account for that necessarily. We tend to be like, oh no, I'll probably be about the same as I am now.
I want the same things.
Yes.
I'll definitely want the same thing.
Yeah. And of course there's parts of us that are consistent. It's not that, like, I don't want to gaslight anybody out of the things that they want, especially what they want right now. But it is just funny that we don't, we're just not used to accounting for that.
Well, and I think we have to, right? We have to plan ahead, and we can only plan ahead based on what we know about ourselves today. And so when you say, well, I'm going to make my 10-year plan, my 5-year plan, you have to base it on what you know, which is yourself. But I think, you talked about earlier, having to really release the grip on this is the right way. I hold this to be the truth, and to say, like, that's what I want in 10 years today. But being okay letting your past still unfold sort of fluidly without holding it so tight that you're like, no, I have to arrive at this street in this city with this color house when I'm 47.
Yes.
Like, it's just not, it's not a reality that we can do that. It's not real likely.
Have you all actually made 5-year or 10-year plans before, ever?
I feel like I'm trying to think through that. I feel like I have loosely, yes, but not, from my recollection, not super detailed. Like they've been, oh, like, I think I'd like these things in 5 or 10 years, but not probably maybe the downfall, not necessarily strategies of how to get there.
Sure.
Yeah. What were you going to say?
Similar, I think for me, I spend a lot of my day and a lot of my life just dreaming of where I can go and what I can be. And so there's this thought that goes through my mind often, which is like, yeah, when I grow up, I'm going to do that. And then I stop sometimes and I'm like, oh shit, I'm 36. Maybe I'm grown up, or I still sometimes have the thought of like, well, when I'm in my 30s, I'll be able to do that. And I'm like, I'm almost out of them.
Oh, wow.
And so there is that, like, I have never sat down and written down a list. I'm notoriously bad at anything note related. So a lot of it is just fluid, but I can still hold on to those dreams and visions really tight.
Well, you have a really great capacity to store it up there, like in your brain,
and a really great capacity to not let go of it.
Interesting. Yeah. I think, like, literally the only time I've ever done any kind of detailed 5-year plan, it was often because I was like with somebody who really wanted a 5-year plan for their life, and so I kind of try to jump on that bandwagon. And I've never had one that's like turned out exactly how I thought that it was going to.
Yeah.
I mean, I think even like thinking through the year, like putting it down to like a year plan, and like at the beginning of the, it's January now, thinking through 2024, like how can I, make shifts and changes for this year, and what am I doing? And I think it's great, but you have to also recognize that I think planning there's a definite great piece to it, and also holding that you have to be able to be willing to move with the changes, and that and shift things as needed. But yeah.
This conversation kind of tied into a question I was thinking of earlier when you talked about that identity crisis of you and Jace sort of winding up in a default monogamous relationship. And I'm curious, it's sort of along the lines of, is non-monogamy an activity or an event for you, or is it more of who you feel you are? And I feel like
identity or a choice,
right? An identity or a choice kind of thing. And I think to me, it ties in here because if it were just, a choice where maybe you choose like, okay, I'm going to do it now, I'm not going to do it. I can see where you would lose yourself in that if it's not baked into a plan, it could just be lost versus its core of who you are. And it's okay if it goes away for a year or two, but you haven't lost that piece of it.
Sure. Well, I like that you asked if it was an event for me, like a convention. I think that really spoke to some of the stuff that I was really chewing on for that year, was because, during that year, I wasn't necessarily like miserable, chomping at the bit, like, oh my, because I was also recovering from getting out of a 6-year relationship. I wasn't ready to just like get back out there right away. And I also had a lot of projects and we were still working on the book and there was a lot that was taking up my time. And so of course I would pose that to myself, like, what if this is just how it is now? Like, how does that feel to you? And I kept coming back to like, whenever I would imagine being monogamous with Jace for the rest of my life, that just felt weird. Like it felt doable, like we have a really healthy relationship, and if I was going to be monogamous with anybody, it's, this person, I suppose. But it just felt like, when I imagined myself never, exploring other relationships, or when I imagined him never exploring other relationships, it just left me with this impression of like, that feels kind of weird. That doesn't feel quite right. And it wasn't this like vehement and visceral, like, oh my God, that's disgusting to me to think about, or this very fantastical, like, oh my God, yes, like that sounds great. It was a little bit of this like, no, that seems weird. Like, I think this is part of me, at least as far as I can predict into the foreseeable future, and we would talk about that frequently. And, Jace would kind of come down on the same side of things, right? Of just like, it felt weird to think about that kind of future. And so I don't know, like that's a question that I get asked all the time. I think non-monogamous people get asked all the time. Like, is this a lifestyle for you? Is this an activity for you? Is this just something that you do? Or is this an inherent part of your being? And, I don't know, man. there's parts of it that to me personally feel kind of immutable, but I also, I guess I've just increasingly gotten unsure about like, do I even know who I am? Like, what is the nature of self really? What is the nature of identity? Is there such a thing as self, as a separate self from other, so I start getting really Zen and Buddhist about this stuff really quickly. So the answer, and maybe we can follow up again in another 4 years and we can see what happens. The answer is right in this moment. It feels like this feels kind of inherent to me, but it also doesn't feel like it's all of my identity.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
And it sounds like nobody's ever asked you if it was an event.
No,
so
that was the first for me.
I feel unique in that one.
Well, but it makes sense. Like, I think it makes sense because there's a lot of people who practice non-monogamy where it is like we're largely monogamous during the year until we go to hedonism for our vacation and then we go nuts, or like we're monogamous during the year until we go on the swingers cruise. And so that to me is like non-monogamy as an event, I suppose.
Yeah. And I think that's what I was sort of getting at with it is I think for some people we're going to do it and I can easily shut it off and I put it away and I'll get it out if it feels like a good time, or we do it annually. Like you said, it's the annual getaway to go and do this. And so I appreciate you saying that. And I think too with this, I think this is another one of those that can ebb and flow.
That's what I was just going to say too.
Maybe sometimes it feels a little more like, oh, this is really core to me. And, sometimes it's more like, I could take it or leave it, right now. It's, I've got enough other stuff going on, or I'm feeling satisfied or whatever.
I will say that this year, having the experience of like having another partner again, it's been really valuable. It's definitely had its ups and downs. Definitely after a year of monogamy where things definitely felt a lot quieter and calmer and arguably a little bit simpler. And then like having another relationship, it was like, oh, right. Okay. Yeah. I got to get back into this mode of caring for multiple partners. But it, having the experience did affirm to me, like, even when it's sometimes been like hard, that have been like, no, but like this still feels right to me. Like I still really enjoy this experience of having more than one partner and, having my partners, being friends with each other and getting along with each other and stuff like that. So that's been some more information that has come in after this year of unintentional monogamy.
Yeah, I love that. I have maybe a weird question. It feels like a weird question. So during that year of monogamy, you are somebody who
I feel like it could be the title of a book.
Oh, yeah.
Your year of monogamy.
The year that we decided to spice things up in our relationship and try being monogamous for a year. Yeah.
Well, it's funny you say that, because the question is sort of, did you find, as somebody who has navigated non-monogamy for a very long time, writes books about it, coaches it, does all of the things, did you feel like when you came back to monogamy for a little while that you were just like, it was like so, like you were bringing, I don't know, a dump truck to where you just needed a little pail, to scoop some sand. You just like had so many tools that it was just like, this is way easy. Like now I have the answers and I can do it and it's easier. Did it present new challenges?
That's really hard for me to answer because of the fact that it was Jace, like someone who also has all of these tools, who also is in the very same boat. I think it'd be different, like if I'd gone through that experience and then like started dating somebody brand new and decided to be monogamous.
Mm-hmm.
I might have a little bit of maybe that dump truck to the gopher hole situation. But because it was with Jace and our relationship has definitely benefited from like hundreds of hours of like reading research studies together on relationships and on communication, right? So it's like my experience of that relationship, I would say, as far as the quality of it, didn't necessarily change. It wasn't like, oh, now that we're monogamous, things feel like way closer, way more intimate, or anything like that. If anything, there was a little bit more of, can you please leave the house? Because he was used to me like sometimes being gone for months at a time or spending weekends away or stuff like that. And so when I started dating again, he was like, oh, thank goodness. I'm excited for that, that I can get the house to myself.
I get some more me time.
Yes. The area where I would say things felt easier is I did feel like I had a little bit more time to myself. Although again, that was a year of like a lot of projects and a lot of work stuff that happened. And so it wasn't like I was just sitting around all the time. And the other area where things felt easier is dealing with family felt easier. Like dealing with all of our boomer family members felt a lot easier. Because I think, again, Jace and I are both fortunate in that our family members are largely, I would say, confused yet supportive of like the work that we do and the kind of relationship practice that we have. But I do feel like there was something, I think this is me projecting a little bit. Nobody actually told me this, so like this could be 100% in my head, but I felt like I perceived a little bit of a like, oh, thank God you're normal now. Okay, thank God. I know how to talk to you now about your relationships and your home life and stuff like that. So I do think that area felt a little bit easier because it's just stepping back into the mainstream, right? Like stepping back into what everybody knows and is comfortable with and familiar with, and that there's benefits to that. Swimming against the mainstream is exhausting.
It is.
Yeah. That other people don't have to, you're not forced, I guess, encouraging people to expand their growth edges.
Right.
You're back into the mainstream.
Yeah. I love that you said that too, Dedeker. If you're constantly swimming against the norm, sometimes you do need to just float and take a breath.
Yes. I think this is something I have to remind myself a lot and remind the people that I love and remind my clients that, this shit gets exhausting and it's okay sometimes if you're just like, I can't be out at work. I could be out at work. I'm sure it wouldn't affect my job. Like, I don't think my job is precarious or anything like that. But like having to deal with having these 5, 6, 7, 8 conversations with all these people is just like too exhausting when I'm already having to deal with like being out to my family, for instance. And like, this is stuff that a lot of people deal with anyway, like people who are queer, people who are trans, that sometimes, like you said, we need to float. We need to have the moments where we give ourselves the break because this stuff is tiring, and we need to recharge that energy to keep on going and keep on swimming up the stream.
Yeah, totally. And this is a secret, what is it? A camouflaged plug for both of our communities of just the benefit there is, right? You don't have to, you can be you and float, even if it's just in that one space. And I think that to me is the beauty of finding your community, whether it's yours, your actual multi-amory community, ours, or whatever community you need to find out there to give you that place to rest and just be you without having to hide you.
Yeah, anytime that I have stepped into, especially an in-person community space, which I don't do very often because I'm definitely an introvert, but like I always forget how much relief is there. Like, I think I sometimes, when I step into those spaces, I don't realize the muscles that I've been clenching the entire time. And by muscles, sometimes that's literal muscles, sometimes it's like figurative muscles of figuring out which parts of you can show, who knows what can I say? I need to keep track of, do the mental gymnastics of how I need to talk about this to people, that when you're in a space where that can drop away, it can really, really be recharging.
Yeah. Yeah, without a doubt. And I also, when you say something, I also just, there's a part too. We don't often get to talk to people who've been such at maybe the forefront or is well versed in this, but that you still come up against the stuff with family. You still come up against this with friends. And there's maybe just a little peace of mind in there for everybody else that, Emma and I struggle with this stuff. You struggle with this. I would guess Jace, Emily, and probably every other person out there writing books and podcasts. It's still hard.
Yeah.
And we're not immune.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes, again, because the non-monogamous community is so online, it's it's a blessing and a curse, right? The blessing being like these kind of really nice community spaces that you can join and be a part of and feel affirmed and validated and seen. And then the curse being that sometimes I find that I sometimes forget how much stigma there still is about any kind of non-normative relationship until like I end up, the algorithm serves me something that's outside of my little bubble, or I go do an interview on a more mainstream publication or a more mainstream podcast, and then like end up seeing the comments afterwards. And I'm just like, Jesus, that like sometimes it's easy. And I mean, like, we're all doing really important work to be vocal and to raise awareness and to raise support for the wide spectrum of relationship diversity. And it's always a little bit of this grim reminder of like, there's still so much more work to do, just like so much more work to do. And then sometimes like, I don't know, I want to throw my hands up at some of the like ways that people respond to non-monogamy. Like, I really want to throw my hands up and just be like, the way people respond is though I'm saying that like I want the right to like chop my partner's arms off and like sew them together, and I'm just like, y'all, like, we can calm down about this. The stakes are not actually that high on this one of all things in the world to be upset about.
Yeah. I think it's a threat though to their right existence, to their right. If you're breaking out, I mean, so many of these norms and these things and right, life is hard. It can be really hard for people. And so if you find a rhythm and a groove and somebody comes along and says, but maybe that's not the only way, it's like, well, I just figured this way out.
Sure.
And so I kind of feel similar to what we were saying a few minutes ago of like, okay, we just figured out this new groove. We brought somebody brought a new partner into the dynamic. We're feeling good. Okay. and then somebody's like, oh, somebody new.
Sure.
And so you're constantly having to grow, and not everybody wants to grow.
Sure. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I couldn't agree more that just you're like, it's not that big of a deal. Like, does it matter to you if I go out on a date?
Right.
And I have my partner at home? Does that really impact you?
Yeah, sometimes I'm like, are you really that upset that I get to have the same fight over the dishes with not one person but two people? Like really?
Yeah. The other side of the coin that because everybody thinks it's just orgies and sex. That's what we get. You have 5 partners, you gain 5 times the sex.
Yes,
and you're like, it's not quite that simple of math.
Actually, I just have to have 5 times the conversation.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm curious, switching gears a little bit. You mentioned coming out of that year of monogamy into rekindling a relationship that it sounds like you kind of had de-escalated and escalated. And I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about that, navigating the different escalations in relationships, because it's something that can be really difficult.
Yeah. And I will, full disclosure, the work's still not done with this particular relationship because
of course,
it's this weird thing where there has already been a 15-year relationship, and there, even in a friendship, there is still an attachment style at play, and there's still attachment dynamics at play. And so it is sort of this weird experience. Oh God, this absolutely wild experience of when we decided to start dating again, having this weird, there was some NRE actually, I totally got caught off guard, even though you're not a new person to me and it's not technically a new relationship, but there was still some sort of weird brain chemical stuff that came through. But then also we kind of have 15 years worth of therapy work to do at the same time, and there's still some stories, we kind of have to put some old narratives to bed and create some new ones. It's, when I'm talking about it now in the abstract, I think my academic, scientist brain is how fascinating. In reality, it's really sometimes disorienting and exciting and also weird. And also this is the kind of thing where there isn't really a book about this one either, at least not that I've
found. No. How to take a friendship, 15-year friendship, and escalate it into a romantic relationship.
Yeah, I learned that in romance novels, there is a friends to lovers sort of genre, but I've not done any extensive reading quite yet.
And to be clear, it sounds like the two of you had kind of dated a little bit. Yeah, we met in college. But this is okay, but you hadn't taken the relationship to a more serious romantic relationship until the last year.
I don't know. The way that we've kind of been framing it is that it's we're getting this chance to meet each other again in our 30s and see what it's like to date in our 30s as opposed to dating when we're 21, and I will say that some of the work has, for both of us, has been a little bit of putting those 21-year-olds to bed, because they're still present. That was also the weird thing is kind of stepping back into that relationship was a little bit of oh, wow, all these things I forgot about how I felt and what I thought and what I was scared of and what I wanted when I was 21. She's still in there, and we've got to find ways to be in dialogue with that younger self, or kind of looping back around to that whole discussion of how different we are from our younger selves and our future selves. But that's definitely been something I've really chewed on a lot this year.
Yeah, it's so, you kind of said, it's so fascinating. It is interesting. And we see that dynamic mirrored in, I'll say for us as well, right? We've known each other and been together since we were 17 and 18. Well, we've known each other since we were 13. And so there are times inevitably where stuff pops up and we're still in that mindset that that was shit from high school or that was shit from our freshman year of college. Yes. And we're I'm not that guy. You're not that woman anymore. We are very different people, but we bring that forward. Yes. And I think it is really interesting the way you talked about you had escalated it, then sort of and these words escalate,
I
de-escalate.
know.
You
Yeah.
transitioned,
Yeah.
you transitioned into like romance out of it and back into it while keeping a friendship. And I also think it's really beautiful because that's what we hear a lot of people talking about. One of the benefits of polyamory or non-monogamy is we don't have to do the, hey, we broke up, I'm never talking to you again because you're
Sure.
now my enemy.
Sure.
You're transitioning into a different dynamic that is better suited for the two of you or the however many of you there are for that time.
Yes. Yeah. It's also gotten me thinking a lot about, so I trained via like the Gottman Institute method for couples therapy. And, the Gottman Institute research really strongly suggests that the quality of a romantic relationship is based on and influenced by the quality of the friendship between the two people. And they break down friendship into things like, do you maintain a sense of cognitive room? Like what that means is like, is there literally space in your brain that's dedicated to like keeping up to date with the other person, with, what's on their heart, what's on their mind, what are their stressors right now, what are they going to do at work today, who's their favorite family member, these things that we do maintain for friends as well as for romantic partners. And they also include, the two other factors of friendship includes things like, admiration, fondness and admiration. Like, do you like the other person? Do you have a sense of admiration for the other person? And then also bids, responding to bids, right? So it's like when you reach out to me for my attention, like, does the other person respond? And the more that I've been thinking about this, the more that I've thought about this, not only in my romantic relationships, like really looking at that and looking at the quality of the actual friendship in my romantic relationships, but also my friendships as well, of really trying to not take those for granted and really trying to examine, this particular friend, do I still feel fondness and admiration for them? Has it been a long time since I've kind of updated my inner cognitive room about what's going on with them? And that's just been like, I think a really, really helpful thing for me as far as thinking about the quality of my relationships more globally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Regardless of the label or the structure, are you treating it the way that you want to treat it?
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm just, sorry. I'm sitting with that for a moment. I love it. I guess I'm curious and how, if you see any, speaking of future selves, if you see like kind of the path you're going down now, like kind of, do you see any major changes? Where do you see yourself
We need
going?
your 5-year plan.
Oh no.
Dedeker.
Dang it.
No. Not the 5-year plan. Just general thoughts of kind of where you're at now and where you're wanting.
Yeah. So funnily enough, I think that I have found myself for a couple of years now really trying to rethink my relationship to, I guess, what people would maybe more call quote unquote like casual relationships with other people. Like because, like the things that I've learned about myself is like, well, I'm still non-monogamous and I still like having multiple partners, but I'm also a busy lady and I don't necessarily have all the time to just have super, super deep, very time consuming relationships with everybody in the world. And so what does that mean for me? And I think that, kind of more like casual relationship or less entwined relationship is not something that I've done very well with in the past or that I've really experienced a ton of in the past. I do think that our traditional dating rules that we receive from our culture really puts people into two boxes of like, I'm going on a date with you and I'm hoping that you're my soulmate, or I'm going on a date with you and I hope that I can bring you home with me afterwards and that's it. And it really erases this vast in between that is there. And so that's something that has been on my mind recently is, would I be open to, being able to be in quote unquote partnership with somebody they only saw once a month or once every few months or things like that? Like, would that add anything to my life? Like, how would I want to show up? Like, are there things that I would be sacrificing in that type of relationship? But would it be worth the benefits? Like that's definitely stuff that I've been thinking about quite a bit. during the year of being monogamous, Jason and I were also like, are we swingers now? Do we become like the predatory unicorn couple now? Like, this is a great opportunity to really expand our non-monogamy portfolio of experiences. So I've also kind of thought that, I went through in my mid-20s, I did like a lot of non-monogamous experimentation with all kinds of different types, like I, tried like swinging and like all these different kind of different structures. And now maybe I'm kind of maybe wanting to experience that again in my 30s, be like, what is it like now? Playing around with kind of these different types of non-monogamy. A lot of this though, like lives in my brain and is quite theoretical because busy lady, like I said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like there's a lot of balls you're juggling.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Exactly.
But it is fun to think about it though. And I think too, it would likely be a very different experience swinging in your 20s versus swinging in your 30s. Mm-hmm. And I also like think back and I remember I talked a bit about like, when I'm going to grow up. And I think there was so much of our swinging experience was in our early 20s. And we were often with people in their 30s and 40s, and they seemed so much older. And now I'm like there, and I'm like, well, I wonder what it's like if I was to be in that environment in this body mm-hmm. with this, with this knowledge and wisdom and experience. And so it is an interesting sort of thought experiment.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah. But I don't know. I mean, I feel hopeful about the future. That's maybe one thing that I can say as far as that. Yeah, I feel really grateful that I have a lot of experience and I have a lot of tools. And like, frankly, that I have good relationships, that I feel relatively empowered in my relationships as far as being able to communicate things or ask for the things that I need or be honest, and so yeah, I'm just like, I don't know, who knows what's next? Who knows like what new non-monogamy label is going to come out of the factory, the social media factory in 5 years that's going to just like blow my mind or turn me off. Who knows?
Right, for sure. Well,
who knows?
Well, it's funny that you say that because as you were talking, I was thinking, right, with what you said, rolling all the way back to the very beginning about sort of your approach now is just like, please do whatever relationship thing works for you. Be kind, be considerate, show up with all of the tools and be consensual. And it sounds like that's sort of where you're almost talking about going for yourself is mm-hmm. Maybe it's swinging, maybe it's something different. Maybe it doesn't have any label, but it just could be a thing that I now take. I have enough tools in my toolkit to just be in a relationship, mm-hmm. whatever it makes sense for it to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I suppose that if I was going to like really chop it down to super bare bones, I suppose I know that in the future, I'm going to keep looking for good people who can communicate. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's like, that's like very, very, very minimal, but like that's
good
a baseline.
People who can communicate.
Yeah.
But from there you can build just about anything because you can come to the table and say, I'm feeling this, I'm thinking that, this would work for me, what works for you. They can share, and then you go, we're going to make a widget, and you name it whatever you want. It doesn't even have to have a label. You just say, we're just going to do it. Mm-hmm. I think mm-hmm. there's a lot of power. I find mm-hmm. that to be a really exciting place.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I find myself often having to do some work with clients around, everyone's favorite hot topic of boundaries. And because I'm just surprised by how often people come to me like really in a panic, like that seems to stem from like, I'm going to be forced to do something that I don't want to do, whether it's in relationship or in a person that I'm going to be forced to hang out with, or I'm going to be forced to have a particular relationship with somebody or whatever. And I don't know. I think I find myself often really reassuring people that like, if you trust in your own sense of boundaries, as in like where you begin and end and what it is that you actually want, and if you trust in your ability to at least try to communicate, maybe the other person is not going to be able to hear it. Maybe the other person is not going to be able to like it, but at least that's your empowerment in the situation, that like you provided that you're like in a situation where you're not like being abused or controlled or things like that. Like you have this ability to be your own last defense in relationship. And I think I end up spending a lot of time really trying to shore that up in people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's because it's so easy to lose ourselves, I think, in that moment and think, like you said, that we have to do it some way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and you get wrapped up in everything. It's easy to get wrapped up. It's easy to get pulled into the emotions and just the excitement and to step back and be, oh, what's realistic? What's right now?
Yes. Yeah.
Difficult.
Wow.
But important.
Yeah, totally. I love this conversation. I always love getting a chance to talk to you. And would I have like one or two more questions, but we'd love for you to plug all of your work, tell people where they can find you. We know you've got a book out and we know you're doing an amazing retreat and not too long. Mm-hmm. So we wanted to give you a chance to talk about that.
Yeah. So I'll talk about the retreat first, but myself and Orit Krug, who is a dance and movement therapist, we've pulled together a somatic healing retreat for polyamorous folks that's going to be taking place in Costa Rica in April of 2024. I'm mega excited. This whole kind of somatic therapy thing has been my kick for the past few years. I don't get a ton of opportunities to like gush about it on the podcast necessarily. And so I'm really excited to be able to share this with people. So if people want more information about that, they can go to multiamory.com/retreat to get the dates for that. If you just want to listen to my podcast, you can find that wherever fine podcasts are sold or whatever your preferred podcast player is. You can go to multiamory.com. That's where you're going to find information about our book. And you can also go to my website as well, dedekerwinston.com, and all the usual stuff that if you type Multiamory into pretty much any social platform, you're going to find us.
Perfect. And links to everything you just said will be in the show notes so people don't have to write that all down.
Yes.
And also just a quick plug for anybody who doesn't remember, back on episode 309, we actually had Orit on. And so if you would like to learn more about her and her incredible story and work, please go check that out.
Yeah, that was back in October of 2023. So just a few months ago.
Okay. Not too long ago.
No.
Too long ago. Yeah. And so, thank you for all that. So my question is, I feel like this conversation was not our standard arc of like talking about a relationship and where you're not, and that's perfect because, well, we have rapport, but I would love to go back to the roots with a question. And the question is about bloopers because it's fun. And I feel like going through the pandemic and non-monogamy, did any...
And the year of monogamy.
Bloopers come in relationally. If you want to talk sex bloopers, we get some people who tell their hilarious orgy stories. Not trying to corner you into that. Just whatever comes up for you is like, we went off the rails a little there.
Because I'm having like two experiences. One is kind of like, I don't recall any. And then the other experience is like, there were probably so many. I need to sit and think about that. Bloopers. To be honest, I'm what's coming, the number one blooper that comes to mind for me is not a recent one. It comes from more of my earlier days of polyamory where, okay, first I'm going to drag my ex and then I'm going to drag myself. So bear with me.
Okay.
So this was many years ago. I was in my mid-20s. It was my first actual like polyamory experience. So as in my first experience where I'm dating someone who's also dating someone where there's like multiple emotionally entwined relationships involved. Like up to that point, like all of my non-monogamy experience had either been swinging or kind of more casual stuff, or like, oh, there's like one primary couple and everybody else is a little bit more casual. And so this was new to me. And it was new to him too. And he wasn't great at it. And, his other partner was also kind of only semi on board with the whole non-monogamy thing. And oh gosh, I ended up in this situation, like this really crummy situation where basically, like, when I would spend the night at his place, if I met, I was going to be coming over soon, like I would have to help him kind of basically like hazmat the place to make sure there wasn't a ton of evidence of me around, even though like she knew that I was in the picture, but it was kind of like, even like seeing your toothbrush around or whatever, like that's going to be too much. So we need to like hide those things. And because I was in my mid-20s and had bad boundaries, I was just like, okay, and just agreed to do that, and started getting like more and more resentful because it didn't go the other way, right? That like, because I was kind of like the cool girl who was much more familiar with non-monogamy, that like there wasn't kind of the same like, oh, I'm going to scrub all the evidence that he was with his other partner. Oh God, I can't believe I'm confessing this live. I started throwing away my Meta's toothbrush out of spite.
So the toothbrush was really a key component.
The toothbrush really became a thing, right? Like I started getting so resentful that like I have to hide my toothbrush, but then I have to look at her toothbrush all the time, that like there were some days where like as part of the whole kind of cleanup process, like I would just take it and throw it in the dumpster outside on the way out. And I never confessed to what I was doing. And I've done some work on that since then, on processing the situation. I'm proud to say I've not thrown away any other Meta's objects since then that I can recall.
Progress.
Yes. Yes.
I love it. I also say, I think
it's such a ridiculous thing because it's like I've made much worse blunders and bloopers in non-monogamous relationships, much more egregious stuff. But for some reason, like the intersection of mistake and like totally silly and ridiculous feels like it lived with that toothbrush situation.
Yeah. And I also can totally see how it, like, in that moment gave you a little power back of like, I have a little like, oh, like this is what I need to do right now.
Yes. It was also, oh God, okay, fine. While we're on the train, I'm just going to like let it all go. It was also like a nice toothbrush as well. Like it was kind of the beginning of those like battery operated vibrating toothbrushes. And like I threw one of those in the dumpster. That's how resentful I was of this whole situation.
Well, I will say,
I feel like anyone who's my Meta now is going to be like regarding their toothbrush with their
watch out. Reminder: this was a long time
ago.
I will say, my brain went to, well, there's way worse things you could have done with the toothbrush. So if I'm in that boat and I'm like, well, all they did was throw it away, I'm like, well, at least they didn't do other things with it. And then I'm just brushing my teeth, just completely in the dark about it. So I give you credit, Dedeker, for just throwing it away.
That's nice.
I also have to say that it reminds me, this is way off topic. Well, it's on the toothbrush topic. It reminds me of a Dan Savage thing that he talked about one time. This was like many, many years ago, and it always stuck with me. And I've always corrected for this, which is he remembered, he had talked about somebody who called into the show, and their thing was whenever they went to like a house party, and I don't know how they managed to do this, but this is kind of gross. So anybody who's listening doesn't want to be grossed out, plug your ears. They would take like a drop of cum and put it on like the toothbrushes of the people who lived. It was like this weird, it was like this weird fetish thing that this guy did. Yeah. And like he confessed it to somehow to Dan Savage, like in an email or in a love letter of the day. And so ever since I heard that, I'm like, my toothbrush is nowhere to be found.
So. I think that's the lesson that we're learning is like, don't leave your toothbrush out anywhere. Lock it in a safe.
Exactly. And so to my point earlier, you could have done way worse things with their toothbrush than just simply throw it away.
Thank you for putting it in perspective. Makes me feel a little bit better.
You're welcome. You are welcome. And please, nobody listening to this get ideas. This is not a brainstorming session. might be one of the weirder conversations we've had on this show. I love
it. You never know. You never know where it's going to go.
That's right. Well, thank you for going down that ride.
Oh,
with
thank
us.
you. Thank you for letting me, thank you for being my confessional, because I haven't, have I written about that? No, I think I've always told myself I'm going to write about it, because it's, again, at that weird intersection of like shameful, but maybe a little bit silly. But no, I think you heard it here first, folks.
Yeah.
Well, we are honored.
Yeah. Does it feel like a relief or a little bit uneasy?
It feels like a relief. I think that to make it more serious, I think those of us in non-monogamous relationships already, I think, feel a lot of pressure to project a really positive face all the time, right? Because we're just like so used to, like so sick of being criticized and stigmatized. And so we really want to put forward a good, a good face, right? And to make sure that things look good and look valid. And so like, I think we already feel that pressure. And then I think anyone who's talking about their non-monogamous relationships publicly in a public forum really feel that pressure. So for me to be able to at least open up a little bit about maybe a very minor sin is cathartic.
Yeah. And that I love that you say that, because we have to, especially to show for our parents and our friends and our family, like, no, it's cool. It's easy. I don't mind at all that I have to put my toothbrush, like all of this stuff, but you're like, no, I do mind. It does. It hurts. It sucks, And so I'm grateful that you shared, and thank you. And so maybe with that, is there anything else, toothbrush related or not, that you would like to get out in the world today before we let you go and enjoy your afternoon?
No, other than just like, I so appreciate, as always, the work that the two of you are doing. And I hope that everyone that listens to your show, and especially not just this episode, but other episodes, like feels even more empowered to feel like you are normal, and like what you want is normal, and that you're not alone, You're not alone in being non-monogamous, and you're not alone if you're having some like toothbrush issues with your meta.
Exactly. Yeah. That's wonderful.
Wow.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, and just for this conversation as well.
Yeah. It was amazing as always. And we look forward to, we'll say 4 years from now, but how about sooner?
Sure.
Even that would be delightful.
Totally.
Yes.
Totally.
Yes.
Perfect. Well, have a wonderful day, Dedeker, and we'll talk soon.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
And we're back. Thank you so much, Dedeker, for the amazing work that you do, and for coming on and sharing everything you did, and for sharing that incredible toothbrush story.
I think it humanizes us all.
Yeah.
That we're all just as vulnerable to the insecurities and hurts that come along with relationships.
We're out there just figuring it all out.
Throwing away toothbrushes.
Yep.
Just fuck them. That's what I say.
A quick reminder, you can check out all of Dedeker's work using the links in the podcast show notes, and go and check out that Costa Rica retreat in April too. It looks incredible.
And for those of you who are like, I don't want to wait until April, I'd love to meet some more people right now. Well, we'll see you this weekend on February 17th for our next virtual meet and greet, or we'll see you in the community where we're there all day, every day, having a hell of a good time.
Information about that on our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com. Next week, we have an interview with Kim Lee. Yes.
A great interview.
Yep.
An author coming on to share a bit of their, let's call it spicy history.
Yes, it's quite the spicy story.
All right. We'll leave it there, and we will see you all in a week, and we'll see some of you this weekend at our virtual meet and greet.
Sign up on our website. Come join us.
And see you next week.
Happy Valentine's Day, everyone. Wait, gotta do my signature sign.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening.
You're never going to let me have it, are you?
No.